In the next 12 months, a storm is brewing that could upend over 92 million jobs globally, and most people won't see it coming until it's too late. I've analyzed thousands of termination cases and uncovered 12 subtle warning signs that often appear weeks before layoffs strike. Today, I'll show you what to watch for in your workplace, from shifts in communication patterns to unexpected changes in how your responsibilities are handled. If you've noticed strange behavior from management or sudden adjustments in how your work is tracked, it might be time to prepare for what's ahead. The silent communication shift. Ever notice your manager suddenly stops replying to your emails? That's one of the first red flags your job might be in danger. Companies often change communication patterns before layoffs to create distance. It starts small. Weekly check-ins get canceled without explanation, or you're left out of meetings you've attended for years. A tech worker shared how their one-on-ones mysteriously vanished 3 months before their layoff. At first, they thought their manager was just busy. Then the Slack replies slowed down, then stopped completely. By the time HR called them in, the silence had been going on for weeks. This isn't uncommon. 68% of laid-off employees report experiencing communication breakdowns before they were let go. The shift can feel like being ghosted at your own job. You ask a simple question about a project deadline, and instead of the usual quick response, you get a vague reply days later, or worse, no reply at all. Meanwhile, your name starts disappearing from email threads. Colleagues get briefed on decisions that affect your work, but nobody loops you in. The isolation happens so gradually you might blame yourself at first. Watch for sudden formality in messages that used to be casual. HR might start copying themselves on routine requests. Your boss could switch from quick voice memos to carefully worded emails. These aren't coincidences. They're deliberate moves to build a paper trail while keeping you in the dark. Meeting invites are another clue. If you're suddenly uninvited from strategy sessions, but still asked to attend operational meetings, that's a warning sign. Companies often remove employees from decision-making circles before cutting them loose. Sometimes, they'll reschedule important discussions to conflict with your calendar. You show up to what you think is a key planning session, only to find it happened yesterday without you. HR plays a sneaky role here too. They might start asking odd questions about your daily tasks under the guise of process improvement. Suddenly, everyone wants documentation on things you've done the same way for years. One finance worker was asked to train colleagues on systems they'd used for a decade. 2 months later, those trained colleagues were doing their job. The shift isn't always overt hostility. Sometimes it's excessive politeness. Your manager starts thanking you profusely for basic tasks. HR checks in just to see how you're doing. These unnatural interactions often precede bad news. Companies want to avoid lawsuits, so they create a paper trail of positive interactions before dropping the hammer. Document everything the moment you notice these changes. Save emails, screenshot Slack messages, and note meeting attendance shifts. If your gut says something's off, it probably is. One employee I spoke with noticed their manager stopped making eye contact in the hallway. Another realized their name kept getting misspelled in official communications. These aren't mistakes, they're subtle signs you're being phased out. When the silence starts to feel deafening, don't ignore it. It's not just a coincidence, it's a pattern. Performance review traps. That meets expectations, rating you just got might be the corporate equivalent of a warning shot. Companies routinely manipulate performance metrics to justify future layoffs, and they're getting smarter about how they do it. After years of glowing reviews, you might suddenly find yourself facing vague criticisms that never came up before. It's like stepping outside on a sunny day only to be hit by an unexpected storm. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. Take the case of an Amazon employee who exceeded targets for 5 straight quarters, only to be placed on a performance improvement plan, PIP. Their manager suddenly cited communication issues that mysteriously hadn't affected their work for years. This wasn't about performance, it was about creating a paper trail. Research shows 42% of layoffs use performance documentation as legal protection against wrongful termination claims. The tactics are subtle but deliberate. Managers will highlight minor mistakes you've made for years, the kind everyone makes, but now they suddenly matter. That typo in last quarter's report? It's now evidence you lack attention to detail. The meeting you missed 6 months ago? Proof of poor time management. Normal workplace behavior gets reframed as performance issues when they need justification to cut roles. Pay close attention to the language in your reviews. Vague phrases like needs improvement in team collaboration or could demonstrate more leadership are red flags when they appear out of nowhere. These aren't actionable critiques. They're placeholder criticisms designed to create a record. One tech worker told me their review suddenly mentioned cultural fit after 5 years with the company. 2 months later, they were gone. HR departments train managers to document these concerns in specific ways. You might notice your one-on-one notes suddenly become more detailed when they weren't before. Or your manager starts sending follow-up emails summarizing conversations that never needed documentation in the past. These create the illusion of progressive discipline when none actually occurred. The timing often reveals the true motive. If criticisms appear right before budget cycles or during company-wide talent reviews, that's not coincidence. A financial analyst shared how their flawless performance record suddenly developed areas for growth 2 weeks before annual planning meetings. Their entire department was cut the next month. Performance review traps often follow a predictable pattern. 1. Your objectives become suddenly vague or impossible to measure. 2. You receive contradictory feedback from different managers. 3. Previously praised work gets reclassified as adequate. 4. Your manager stops offering development opportunities. Watch for sudden changes in rating scales too. Some companies quietly adjust what exceeds expectations means mid-year. What earned you top marks last quarter might only rate meets expectations now. Others introduce new core competencies that conveniently align with your perceived weaknesses. The PP process is particularly abused. What's framed as a chance to improve is often just a countdown to termination. One study found 87% of employees placed on PPs ultimately lose their jobs, regardless of actual performance. Companies use them to create the appearance of due process before letting people go. If your review contains new, vague criticisms, act immediately. Request specific improvement metrics in writing. Real benchmarks you can measure, not subjective opinions. A good test. Ask your manager to explain exactly what success looks like in each criticized area. If they can't give concrete answers, that's telling. Document every achievement as it happens. Keep a running log of positive feedback, completed projects, and quantifiable results. Email yourself copies of praise from colleagues and clients. This creates a counter-narrative if they try to fabricate performance issues later. One salesperson survived a round of cuts by producing time-stamped emails showing they'd actually exceeded targets, contrary to their PIP documentation. The vanishing workload. One day you're managing 5 major projects, the next you're staring at an empty inbox. This isn't a vacation. It's one of the clearest signs your job might be disappearing. Companies systematically redistribute work before eliminating positions, and they're careful to make it look natural. A marketing director shared how her biggest campaigns quietly got reassigned over 6 weeks. First, her assistant was temporarily moved to another team. Then her VP started attending client meetings without her. By the time she was laid off, all her responsibilities had been parceled out to colleagues. The company called it workload balancing. What it really was, making her role appear redundant. This strategy follows a predictable pattern. You'll be told you're too busy for new assignments while your current work is taken away. Managers use phrases like, "We're just lightening your load," or "the team is helping out." One software engineer realized his job was in jeopardy when his code reviews stopped being assigned. His manager claimed it was because he was overworked, yet his actual workload had never been lighter. Pay attention to how responsibilities get redistributed. If your core tasks, the ones central to your job description, start moving to others, that's a major red flag. Companies often start with your most visible projects first. A financial analyst noticed her quarterly reports were suddenly being prepared by a junior colleague for training purposes. 3 months later, her position was eliminated. The reassignments often come with plausible excuses. You might hear, "We're cross-training the team." This aligns better with Sarah's strengths. Just until this busy period passes. The client requested someone more senior/junior. These explanations sound reasonable in isolation, but together they form a dangerous pattern. One HR manager admitted they use a 3-step test before cutting positions. First, redistribute 30% of the work, then 60%, then 90%. If operations continue smoothly at each stage, the role gets eliminated. The emotional toll of this process can't be overstated. Sitting at your desk with an empty inbox, watching projects you once owned move forward without you, creates a sense of isolation. You'll sit in meetings where everyone discusses work you're no longer involved in. Your calendar will show blank spaces where important deadlines used to be. Coworkers might even joke about how lucky you are to have less work. It's disorienting and demoralizing. Some companies take it further by assigning meaningless tasks to fill the gap. A graphic designer was told to refresh the image library after all her real design work was reassigned. The task had no deadline, no clear standards, and no one ever checked her progress. To protect yourself, track every responsibility that moves away from you. Create a simple spreadsheet with 1. The task or project name. 2. Who it was reassigned to. 3. The date it moved. 4. The reason given. This creates a paper trail showing the systematic removal of your core duties. When a sales executive did this, she discovered 80% of her accounts had been redistributed under various excuses before her layoff. Politely push for clarification when work disappears. Ask your manager in writing. Can you help me understand why Project X was reassigned? What should I focus on now that these responsibilities have moved? How does this change affect my performance metrics? Their answers, or lack thereof, will tell you everything. One employee got no response to these questions for weeks, then received a vague reply about evolving team needs. She started job hunting that day and found a new position before the layoffs hit. Paper trail to nowhere. That email from HR asking you to document your daily tasks might seem harmless, but it's often the first step in making your position disappear. Companies build paper trails to justify eliminating roles, and they do it through requests that appear completely normal on the surface. Suddenly, everyone wants process documents that nobody cared about for years. A finance worker shared how they were asked to train colleagues on systems they'd used for a decade. The request was framed as knowledge sharing. 2 months later, those colleagues were doing their job at half the salary. This is how companies prove your knowledge isn't unique or essential anymore. They're not cross-training the team, they're replacing you. The requests follow a pattern. First, you'll be asked to write step-by-step guides for tasks you've always handled without instructions. Then comes the knowledge transfer phase, where you're expected to train others on systems you built. Finally, they'll request decision rationales for routine choices you've made independently for years. Each step creates evidence that your role can be performed by someone else. HR departments use specific language to mask what's happening. We're standardizing procedures across teams. This is just for continuity planning. The new hires need reference materials. It's part of our quality improvement initiative. These sound reasonable, but their timing tells the real story. If documentation requests spike during budget season or before reorganization announcements, that's no coincidence. One operations manager was asked to document 27 different processes in 2 weeks, right before his department's restructuring. The documentation trap works because it's hard to refuse. Saying no makes you look uncooperative, while saying yes helps eliminate your job. A software developer spent 3 weeks creating detailed technical manuals, only to be laid off the day she submitted them. Her manager thanked her for making the transition so smooth. Watch for changes in how information gets requested. Casual verbal explanations that used to suffice may now require formal written responses. You might get emails asking you to clarify your thought process on decisions that were never questioned before. These create a paper trail suggesting your judgment can't be trusted. Some companies take it further by requesting documentation in specific formats, like video tutorials or standardized templates. A customer support lead was asked to record training videos for all his troubleshooting techniques. 2 months later, those videos were used to train his replacement. The most dangerous requests involve proprietary knowledge. When they ask you to document trade secrets, client relationships, or unique systems you developed, they're not preserving institutional knowledge. They're stealing your job security. One marketing director refused to document her agency contacts and was fired for insubordination. The company then hired her junior assistant at half her salary. Protect yourself with these strategies. Provide high-level overviews without critical details. Omit proprietary shortcuts and personal connections. Document processes in your own style, not their templates. Keep copies of everything you create. Note who requested each document and when. When asked to train colleagues, focus on general principles rather than specific techniques. If pressed for details, say you're still refining the process. One engineer survived 3 rounds of layoffs by making his documentation deliberately vague. His methods were too valuable to share completely. Track every documentation request in a simple log. Date of request. Who made it? What they asked for. Deadline given. Reason provided. Patterns will emerge. A project manager noticed HR requested documentation on all her client relationships 2 weeks before contract renewals. She realized they were preparing to reassign her accounts. Push back professionally when requests seem excessive. Ask, how will this documentation be used? Who needs access to these materials? Is this part of a larger initiative I should know about? Their answers, or lack thereof, will reveal their true intentions. Budget cuts you can't see. When they take away the free coffee, start updating your resume. That missing snack station isn't just about cutting costs. It's the first tremor before the earthquake. Companies often test the waters with small austerity measures before moving on to salaries. A major retail chain removed all break room snacks months before closing 100 stores. Employees dismissed it as penny pinching, but it was a calculated move. These cuts follow a predictable pattern, peeling away layers of perks like an onion. First, the free coffee, team lunches, and holiday parties disappear. Then come hiring freezes and travel restrictions. Finally, benefits get trimmed. Each step conditions employees to accept belt tightening, while executives still collect bonuses. Research shows 73% of companies implement these small cuts 6 to 12 months before major layoffs, a clear warning sign if you know what to look for. Watch for sudden changes in spending approvals. Projects that used to get rubber stamped now require multiple levels of sign-off. Expense reports face scrutiny for charges that were previously routine. A sales team member shared how her $50 client lunch reimbursement was denied after years of no issues. 6 months later, her entire department was gone. The excuses for these cuts always sound plausible. We're being more fiscally responsible. This aligns with our sustainability goals. Temporary measures during this slow period. Redirecting resources to strategic priorities. What they don't say is that these temporary measures are stress tests. If operations continue smoothly after perks are removed, people are next. One tech company famously eliminated free snacks, monitored productivity, and, when it didn't drop, cut 20% of staff 3 months later. Pay attention to equipment and supply changes. New computers get delayed due to supply chain issues. Office supplies dwindle. Broken chairs don't get replaced. An office manager noticed the company stopped replacing expired first aid kits. That same quarter, they eliminated all administrative positions. Training budgets are often the first to go. Conferences get canceled, professional development courses vanish, and even mandatory certifications are postponed. A nurse practitioner shared how her hospital stopped covering continuing education credits, then laid off 30% of clinical staff 6 months later, citing outdated skills as partial justification. The most telling cuts involve communication tools. When they downgrade your Zoom license or switch to a cheaper collaboration platform, it's not just cost-cutting, it's isolation. A remote worker noticed his company moved from Slack to a bare-bones alternative that made collaboration harder. 3 months later, his entire remote team was dissolved. Some companies get creative with their cuts. One marketing firm replaced all monitors with smaller screens to reduce eye strain. Another switched to cheap pens that barely worked. These aren't real savings. They're psychological preparation for harder cuts to come. Monitor internal financial communications closely. All-hands meetings will start featuring buzzwords like operational efficiency and cost discipline. Memos will tout doing more with less while avoiding specifics. A finance director shared how her CEO began mentioning headcount rationalization in earnings calls months before layoffs hit. Check your company's public earnings reports for red flags. Phrases like workforce optimization or structural realignment often precede job cuts. One manufacturing worker spotted the term right-sizing our talent footprint in a quarterly report. He started job hunting immediately and beat the layoffs by 2 weeks. Create your own early warning system. Track these indicators. 1. Perk reductions, coffee, snacks, parties. 2. Hiring freezes or slowed recruitment. 3. Travel and expense policy tightening. 4. Training budget cuts. 5. Equipment/supply shortages. 6. Benefit reductions. The more boxes you check, the closer layoffs likely are. Compare notes with colleagues discreetly. One engineer survived 3 rounds of layoffs by tracking which floors lost their coffee machines first. The cuts always followed the same path. The meeting shuffle. When your standing meetings start getting rescheduled for no clear reason, pay attention. That calendar shuffle is often the first sign your role is being sidelined. Companies change meeting patterns before layoffs to quietly remove employees from decision-making loops. A project manager shared how her weekly strategy sessions kept moving to times she couldn't attend. First, they conflicted with her dentist appointment, then her kid's soccer game. By the third reschedule, she realized it wasn't coincidence. Important decisions were being made without her, and she'd only hear about them after the fact. This isolation tactic happens gradually, so you don't immediately notice. Think of it like a game of musical chairs. Each reschedule, cancellation, or exclusion is a chair being pulled away. By the time the music stops, you're left standing, wondering when you lost your seat at the table. Watch for distinct patterns in meeting changes. Some companies use the last-minute cancel approach, where critical meetings get called off when you're already in the waiting room. Others send invites with outdated Zoom links or schedule meetings during your commute. A product manager missed 3 straight roadmap sessions because they were always scheduled during her customer calls. By the time she saw the new plans, her projects had been deprioritized. Another red flag is being excluded from important meetings while being added to irrelevant ones. You might get dropped from budget discussions, but added to generic team syncs, where nothing gets decided. A sales director found himself invited to more meetings than ever, just not the ones where quotas and territories were assigned. His calendar looked full, but his influence was disappearing. Pay attention to who stops inviting you to what. If your direct manager cuts you from key meetings, but HR starts adding you to compliance trainings, that's a warning sign. A marketing exec noticed she was removed from creative briefings, but suddenly had to attend IT security updates. 3 months later, her creative role was restructured. Meeting minutes can also reveal shifts in your role. If you stop receiving notes from discussions you used to lead, that's not an oversight.